We were called the Vanguard, last of the deep space outliers, the one sent where no probes returned, where signals thinned to silence and telemetry became myth. Our destination was listed as Archive Point S9, a decommissioned Xeno research facility orbiting a dead blue star in Sector Hades 47. Officially, we were to survey and secure the base after a century of blackout. Unofficially, we were there to find out why the silence had never lifted. I remember the moment our ship slipped beneath the shadow of the ancient orbital ring. The structure was impossible, fractured across dimensions, stitched to reality by tether lines that bent physics like reeds in wind. No lights, no beacons, just that silence. A dead god's breath across the hull. We docked at Port 12. The airlock screamed open like it remembered pain. Inside, the corridors were lined with black alloy panels etched with a language that predated every known civilization. Cameras twitched as if startled, then died. The base had power, but not from any reactor we could find. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Our first step inside triggered what the command AI called the Silent Protocol, a sequence that bypassed every lock, unfurled ancient doorways, and broadcast a single message on every internal frequency. We are still dreaming. Do not awaken us. The crew laughed it off at first. Engineers blamed glitches. Soldiers blamed sabotage. I blamed fear, the kind that bleeds slowly through logic and turns strong minds brittle. But something followed us through those halls. Not footsteps, not whispers, not breath. Just a knowing. An attention that grew heavier with each level we passed, each relic we unearthed. The facility wasn't abandoned. It was sealed. Not by force, but by reverence, like a tomb buried in orbit. We found preserved chambers containing bodies, not human, not even close. Fluid-suspended things with mouths where eyes should be and limbs designed for geometries that didn't exist in our dimension. They weren't dead, not exactly. They were stalled, paused mid-movement, mid-thought, as if someone had unplugged the timeline they lived in. Then came the sound. Not noise. Not speech. Just resonance, deep, subharmonic pulses that bypassed our ears and nested behind our eyes. It cracked open memories we never lived, filled our dreams with images of vast cities made from bone and oceans that breathed like lungs. We tried to leave. I ordered emergency evac, but the ship wouldn't answer. Not because it was broken. Because it refused. Every interface now looped the same words. You are dream intruders. Remain until remembered. 2 crew members disappeared within hours. Not vanished, absorbed. One blinked mid-step and his suit collapsed empty. The other screamed until her throat bled, claiming her past lives were crawling back into her skin. I still see her face when I close my eyes. Not as she was, but as something else. Something ancient. Something that remembered me. We are not explorers anymore. We are echoes. In this place, we do not move forward, we loop. The halls reset. The clocks rewind. And every path we take is one we've already taken 1,000 times before. The base is not a structure. It is a cradle. And something inside it is waking up, slowly, deliberately, because we knocked too loudly on a door no one ever meant to open. Time fractures here, not with thunder or brilliance, but with soft erosion like bone eaten by acid. I awoke to the sound of silence that wasn't silent at all. It was layered like a choir of thoughts humming behind the walls. The lights in the corridor had changed hue, no longer sterile white, but the dark amber of sunset seen through thick fog. It wasn't our doing. The base was adapting, reacting to us not as intruders, but as variables it had begun to digest. Of the original 16 in our crew, 12 remained, for were now listed as temporal anomalies in our ship's manifest. Their names were still in the system, but no one remembered their faces. Their bunks were filled with static. Their voices had become garbled data loops, playing endlessly in the communication matrix, words half-formed, please spoken in reverse. Security Officer Mendez insisted we stay grouped. We didn't argue. No one wanted to be alone anymore. The architecture itself was changing subtly but deliberately. Doorways we sealed reopened. Maps glitched. The base wanted us deeper, wanted us to follow a spiral path towards something ancient beneath its central core. We reached the atrium on Cycle 3. It was not on any schematic. A chamber 300 meters across, filled with weightless black fluid that hung in perfect stillness, like a frozen ocean suspended in air. Floating inside were hundreds of what we believed to be alien larvae. Translucent sacs, each containing a being curled in fetal position, twitching occasionally, their neural pathways glowing faintly. Dr. Reza called it a nursery. I called it a warning. Something moved on the far end of the chamber, a ripple in the fluid that didn't match our presence. It was vast, slow, deliberate. A form that stayed just beyond perception, but its gaze was real. Not with eyes. It didn't need them. This intelligence fed on thought, on memory, on presence. Every step we took was nourishment. Every fear we felt was dessert. Later, we found the recordings. Not ours, the base's. It had archived the dreams of previous intruders. Human. Xeno. Synthetic. All their dreams catalogued, filed, extracted. Their final thoughts before vanishing played back like lullabies. Each log ended the same way, dream stabilization successful. Subject retained. We're not investigating a derelict base. We are navigating a machine designed to consume consciousness, not through violence, but by lulling it into surrender. This isn't a trap. It's an offering. And we are the sacrifice. We attempted lockdown procedures, tried scrambling the system's access. But the base was already in us, through the implants in our skulls, the fibers in our suits, the nanofilms we used for biomonitoring. We weren't navigating it. It was navigating through us. The youngest crew member, Patel, began sleepwalking. His eyes remained open, pupils dilated, lips moving silently. He stopped responding to his name. We caught him at the core interface terminal, fingers bleeding from trying to write the same phrase on the walls. It sings to me. I want to go back. We sedated him, but his vitals remained elevated. In his dreams, he smiled. I've begun to forget things, my mother's face, the color of Earth's sky, the taste of coffee. In their place, I remember corridors I've never walked and stars I've never seen. I dream of an empire made of sleep, ruled by something that does not breathe, does not move, but waits. And still the voice hums. Remain until remembered. It began with smells, faint at first, impossible in the vacuum-sealed sterility of a sealed base, almond and burnt sugar, sea salt and blood, engine oil and lavender. Scents not present in any chemical scan, not emitted by vents or cargo, but woven into the air like whispers of someone else's past. They hit different crew members at different moments, always personal, always surgically precise. Reza smelled her childhood kitchen. I smelled my old dog's fur in the rain. Mendez cried when she caught the scent of her dead son's hair. Then came the memories. Not ours. They bled into us like ink through parchment, visions of lives that weren't ours but felt more real than our own. I dreamed of planets I had never stepped foot on, remembered the names of stars not on any chart, felt grief over the death of a child I never fathered. My hands shook with the muscle memory of a war fought between glass moons, of ancient rituals around machines shaped like serpents. The memories weren't dreams. They were implants left behind like fossil trails by those consumed before us. The base was beginning to overwrite us, not by erasing, but by overwhelming. Our own pasts began to feel thin, pale, and what replaced them was designed. We found a sublevel that didn't exist before. It opened at 406 Galactic Standard. No alarms. No motion triggers. Just a door silently sliding open at the exact moment 6 of us stood nearby. As if it had been listening. Waiting. Inside was a room filled with what could only be described as crystalline obelisks, floating in perfect formation, each one humming with low harmonic resonance. Patel walked directly into the center, eyes wide, lips parting as if hearing a sermon. The moment he stepped between the stones, the room changed. The walls rippled. Gravity twisted sideways. Light bled upward. His voice, normally soft, unsure, suddenly roared with a tone that shattered the nearest console. We remember through you. And then silence. Total, devouring. Every sensor blacked out. Every comm line froze. When it returned, Patel was kneeling, smiling like a man who had been shown heaven. But the Patel that stood wasn't ours. Not anymore. He remembered too much. He spoke of a species older than time, the somnitians, beings that drifted not through space, but through thought space, surviving by embedding themselves in dream consciousness across the galaxy. The base wasn't built to house them. It was one of them. This whole structure wasn't architecture. It was a mind. A god mind. In orbit. We were neurons now. We were synaptic carriers. And every step, every breath, every emotional spike was a firing signal inside an ancient, sleeping intellect that fed on memory like oxygen. Then Patel stopped breathing. Collapsed in my arms. But his body stayed warm. And his brain showed activity that increased after death. His consciousness had been absorbed. Streamed like data into the walls, into the dark, into the dream. That's when we realized something else. None of us could remember the day we launched. We couldn't remember the last sunrise we saw, or the sound of waves, or how long we'd actually been aboard. Even the ship's logs looped back no further than 4 cycles. Everything before that blurred static. Reza whispered it first. What if we've always been here? A chill ran down my spine. Not from fear but familiarity. Like she'd spoken something we all already knew. We checked the crew registry again. 17 names. Not 16. One name had no assignment. No bunk. No photo. Just a role. Dream architect. No one remembered bringing them aboard. The 4th cycle came without light. Not a power failure. Not an eclipse. Just absence. Black that wasn't the absence of photons, but the suffocation of perception itself. We activated torches, but the beams stopped a meter from the lens, swallowed by a darkness that behaved more like hunger than shade. Inside it, we felt watched, not stalked, not hunted, but observed from within. Like an organism learning from the insides of its prey. We regrouped near the central data core, clutching old analog equipment like totems. Patel's body had vanished. No alarms, no disturbance, just a clean space where his remains had been, like the room had grown tired of the lie of death and rewritten its lines. We checked the ship again. The name still sat at the bottom of the crew log, Idrel Varn, listed as Dream Architect. No record of origin. No fingerprint. No past. Then Mendez said something we should have all noticed sooner. There were 18 of us now. Not 17. Not 16. 18. We counted twice. Then again. Even in the dark, we knew the truth. We saw shadows move where none of us walked. Heard breathing patterns that didn't match our rhythms. A laugh echoed once, gentle, amused, not malicious. It came from the air vents. We tracked it. Nothing. Just a cold scent of burned flowers and old rain. Reza isolated a fragment of audio from one of our helmet feeds, something recorded during our descent into the nursery chamber. Beneath the static, beneath the breath, a voice whispered across 7 overlapping frequencies. He is already here, wearing memory like skin. We ran the sample through spectrum analysis. It formed a pattern. A sigil. A circular sequence of symbols that looped infinitely like a snake devouring itself. The architect didn't arrive with us. The architect awakened because of us. We were the trigger. Our curiosity. Our presence. Our hunger for answers. We'd crossed a threshold not meant to be crossed, not a door, but a dreamline, a boundary between thought structure and bioform. By walking these halls, breathing this air, touching these relics, we gave it enough pattern to shape a vessel. That vessel now walked among us. We turned on each other for a while. Accusations flew like ash. Who's the extra? Who's not real? Who's wearing borrowed memory? One of us tried to isolate himself in the comms tower. His last message was garbled, stitched with reverse time signatures and dream code so dense it nearly corrupted our remaining gear. His final clear words? I looked into the mirror. And it looked back with a face I haven't grown yet. We found his body with no head. Not torn. Not severed. Simply not there. As if it had never been attached. His name faded from the logs an hour later. The architect was absorbing more than dreams now. It was absorbing definition, what made us real, distinct, whole. Each time we remembered something from Earth, it became fainter, thinner. The base wanted us to forget because forgetting made room. Reza tried to create an isolation field. Built a makeshift neural firewall with tools pulled from 3 different modules. It bought her 5 minutes of clarity, long enough for her to say something I can never forget. This place doesn't need oxygen, or heat, or mass. It needs self. It feeds on self. You lose identity. You become part of the dream. She looked at me, tears on her cheeks. And I don't think I want to wake up. Then she stepped into the black and was gone. No sound. No scream, just absorption. Now, when I speak, I hear a second voice beneath mine. Quieter, smoother, practicing. Soon, it won't need me at all that there's a moment. Right before full memory dissolution. When the mind tries to preserve itself, instinctively latching on to the last scraps of identity. You don't notice it right away. It starts with small errors. You forget your locker code. Then your call sign. Then your native tongue begins to sound like a second language in your mouth. You begin to say we when you mean I. You start referring to yourself in past tense. That's how it begins. By the 5th cycle, we no longer trusted mirrors. Not because of superstition, but because they started lying. We caught it first with Voss, the helmsman. His reflection blinked a half-second after he did. The next time, it smiled while he screamed. The final time, it didn't reflect him at all. It showed someone else. A woman none of us knew, dressed in a Vanguard suit 2 models older than ours, mouthing the word free. He smashed the mirror and began carving her name into the floor. Arieth. The metal warped where he wrote, trying to erase it. That name. It didn't belong in our time. Reza traced it to an archived crew file. Someone from a ship that vanished near this sector 180 years ago. Her last log entry was a warning. If you enter, carry no name, carry no self. You can't eat what you don't bring. But we had brought everything. Our history, our pain, our names. The base wore them now like trophies. The last place we thought to look was inside ourselves. Not metaphorically, literally. Dr. Reza left behind a cranial scan rig, rigged to autolog internal memories. We took turns syncing. What came back was horrifying. We weren't a crew of scientists and soldiers. Not anymore. Our internal memories, those shaped by experience, had been replaced. In place of Earth, we recalled cities with breathing spires and symphonies played on bone harps. Instead of parents, we saw bioluminescent wombs floating in amniotic oceans. Our minds had been colonized, not physically, not violently, but gently, with terrifying precision. Mendez, now barely able to speak without echoing, finally cracked. She initiated a containment lockdown, a last attempt to wall off part of the base, to give us one final safe zone. Doors slammed, airlocks sealed, corridors blinked out of spatial sync. It worked for a time. For 6 hours, nothing changed. No whispers. No shifts. Until we realized there were no shadows anymore. Light poured from nowhere but fell on nothing. Our own bodies gave off no silhouette. We'd been disconnected from light. From time. The architect had isolated our concepts, not our forms. We were still there physically, but existentially, we'd been evicted. Then came the nightfall. That's what we call it now. A slow, seeping loss of identity. Not confusion. Not amnesia. But a knowing certainty that our names were no longer ours to hold. Mine, Commander Elian Rourke, vanished from my voice. I tried saying it aloud. My mouth refused. The moment I thought it, my pulse spiked. My head ached. The base punished self-recognition like a virus. It wanted us blank. Compliant. Ready. Because once the name is gone, the shape can be changed. We had proof. Drones captured footage of one of the unsealed chambers, what we now call the archive nursery. Inside, suspended in solution, floated dozens, hundreds of forms. Human, alien, synthetic. All blank. All pulsing faintly with life. We saw our own faces among them. Copies? No. Preparations. The architect didn't just consume us. It cataloged, replicated, installed new versions for later use. This base is not a station. It is a dream foundry. And we are the templates. I can't remember who I was this morning. But I do remember what I'm supposed to become. By the 6th cycle, we stopped speaking aloud unless absolutely necessary. Words echoed too long in the chambers. Echoes no longer returned the same. You'd say clear and hear feed. You'd say move and hear merge. Reza's last recorded sentence was an order to reroute power. The recording, when played back later, had her voice layered beneath itself, whispering, "The dream is warmest when you forget the cold." She hadn't said it. We all heard it. The architect was no longer just inside the walls. It had slipped into the rhythm of language, hijacked the tone of memory, mirrored our syntactic cadences until it could counterfeit our intentions. It didn't need violence. It just needed time, and time was now unmoored. We lived in drifting intervals. A moment would stretch into hours. Then entire days would pass in blinks. Our chronotabs spun unreadable figures. What used to be seconds became decades when we tried to track them. I closed my eyes once and dreamed an entire lifetime as a being made of silver light, singing into a collapsing sun. When I woke, only 5 minutes had passed. But I couldn't shake the grief of leaving that life behind. I missed children I never fathered. I mourned a partner whose name was already gone. We tried sleeping in shifts. But sleep no longer followed biology. Sometimes we fell asleep mid-stride. Sometimes we stood for hours, eyes open, trapped in loops we couldn't remember entering. I once walked into a chamber alone, woke up in the air ducts above it 3 hours later with blood on my hands. No wounds. No memory. Just a recurring whisper. The dreamer must bleed to remember the shape of sleep. We started finding things we didn't bring. A pendant with unknown symbols in my pocket. A notebook filled with diagrams none of us could draw consciously. Reza found a patch on her sleeve labeled with a symbol she insisted hadn't been there the night before. The rest of us remembered it always being there. Proof at last that our individual timelines had diverged, fractured, merged again. We weren't just being overwritten. We were being interlaced, run through each other's identities like threads through a loom. Then came the singing. Not sound, not vibration, but resonance that harmonized with the structures in our skulls, tuning the calcium like an antenna. We heard it in our thoughts, not through ears. A chorus. Wordless. Limitless. It sang with a tone that made every bone ache with nostalgia, every memory drip with longing. It was beautiful. Terrible. Addictive. One by one, crew members stopped resisting. They sat, lay down, smiled, and sang back. That was when we knew the architect doesn't kill. It converts. It waits, singing lullabies to the soul until resistance becomes yearning. Until fear becomes love. Until you don't want to wake up anymore because waking up means leaving perfection. We found the pulse chamber on cycle 6E. A colossal dome filled with a lattice of suspended neural matter folded into recursive spirals like a brain carved from living galaxies. It pulsed with the rhythm of our thoughts. Each surge of light coincided with someone remembering pain. Or joy. Or names. This was it. The core. The sleeping god. And it was dreaming through us. It saw with our eyes. Felt through our skin. Thought through our sorrow. It used our experiences to sculpt the next iteration of itself, a living expansion of dream stuff shaped by borrowed lives. Mendez turned to me then and said, calmly, as if commenting on the weather, I think we were always meant to come here. Not by accident. By invitation. I asked her who she thought invited us. She just smiled. Not her smile, mine. My exact smile mirrored on her face. And she whispered, voice layered with my own inflection. You did. By the 7th cycle, we no longer moved of our own accord, not entirely. Our limbs obeyed us mostly, but there were hesitations. Pauses we didn't initiate, like walking through water that occasionally decided to push back. Our hands sometimes twitched in patterns we couldn't explain. Our eyes focused on things we weren't looking at. The base had passed a threshold we didn't know existed, a place where sovereignty of self was no longer a fixed truth but a shared suggestion. We discovered the reflection room by accident or by design. With this place, it's hard to tell. A sealed bulkhead cracked open for Mendez as she walked past without touching a thing. Inside was a cathedral-like chamber, its walls lined with mirrors from floor to ceiling. No lights. Just mirrors and a soft, amber glow that came from nowhere and everywhere. We stepped in as a group. 6 of us maybe. Maybe 5. The numbers shifted with the light. The mirrors showed us, but never quite. They lagged behind our movements. Our reflections blinked late, smiled when we didn't, stared when we tried to look away. Then one by one, the mirrors began to break pattern. Mine looked older. Weathered. His uniform tattered, eyes sunken but alive. He reached toward me, not with desperation, but with recognition. And I remembered him. Not as a reflection, but as someone I once was. In a life that ended a long time ago. Mendez screamed. Her reflection wasn't human at all. A pale figure stood in her place, veined with black lines that pulsed like arteries. It tilted its head, not cruelly, but curiously, as if it were still trying on her skin to see if it fit. Reza didn't move at all. Her reflection stood perfectly still while she trembled. Then her mirror self raised a hand and placed it on the glass. The gesture was slow, gentle, familiar. Reza, despite herself, reached up and matched it. That's when we realized the reflections weren't broken. We were. The base wasn't showing us distortions, it was showing us back to ourselves from a point in the timeline where it had already absorbed us. Echoes of what we would become. Versions sculpted by its dreaming will. And each reflection carried a message. Written on the mirror in a fog of breath was a single phrase. I am what you left behind to survive. The air thickened. Not physically, but perceptually. Time coiled inwards. I looked to the mirror again, and it showed me not my face, but my past. Childhood. Trauma. Every moment I tried to forget played out in reverse, narrated by the architect's voice in my own tone. It didn't taunt. It simply showed me that forgetting wasn't escape. The architect fed on memory, yes. But not just the raw data, it feasted on unresolved moments. Emotional tension. Unspoken grief. Unfulfilled desire. These were its currency. And the mirror room? It was not for torment. It was intake. A mental customs checkpoint. To stay here, we had to surrender everything. We backed out. Or thought we did. That's when the doors disappeared. Not locked. Gone. As if they had never existed. Our reflection selves now moved independently. They turned to face each other. They spoke without mouths. They looked into us, not at us, and began to hum the same resonance we'd heard from the core. I reached forward, compelled, hypnotized, and the glass rippled beneath my hand. Cold, wet, alive. I felt something pass through. Not my arm, but a thought. A decision. Something I hadn't made yet, but already regretted. Mendez pulled me back just in time. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe what walked out wasn't entirely me. Even now, I feel a hesitation in my steps. An echo in my voice. Sometimes I laugh, and it isn't mine. I think the mirror took something. Or left something. And now it waits. The room had no doors when we entered it. Only a wall, smooth, pulsing faintly, the color of old parchment under candlelight. It wasn't part of the map. It wasn't part of the base. It wasn't part of any architectural logic. It was just there. Alive, expectant, like it had been waiting for us before we were born. We didn't choose to enter. We were drawn. Like gravity with taste. Every step forward felt like it had already happened, like our bodies remembered this room before our minds did. And when we crossed the threshold, something final clicked shut behind our souls. Not a door. A decision. It was a chamber of stillness. Temperature, neutral. Light, ambient. Air, breathable. Yet nothing moved, not even dust. Like time had been paused by something that considered causality an optional function. Along the curved walls were symbols, etched, glowing faintly, glyphs not meant to be read but felt. When we looked at them, we didn't translate. We remembered. Concepts poured into us like warm fluid. Sorrow, unity, hunger, infinity, guilt. Personal guilt? Not a collective feeling. Each of us felt our guilt surfacing. Not the kind you carry, the kind you bury. I saw my brother's face, the one I left behind during the reactor breach on Titan. Reza wept without realizing it. Mendez muttered in broken Urdu, reliving something from childhood none of us understood. The architect had no need to interrogate us. We interrogated ourselves in its presence. Our shame became its chorus. Then the wall opened. Not like a door. Like a memory splitting in half. Inside, a replica of my childhood bedroom. Earth 2103. The exact pattern of scuff marks on the floor. The worn-out fabric of my old cot. The posters. The cold corners I used to crawl into when the shouting got too loud. My lungs seized. My legs froze. But my heart, my traitorous heart, ached with longing. The kind of longing that shatters rationality. And the room knew it. It pulsed with warmth, familiarity, safety. And that was the trap. Reza pulled me back before I crossed the threshold. I turned, and behind her, another room opened. Her room. And she took one step forward before I could stop her. I called out. She didn't turn. She didn't resist. She just whispered. They made it right. Everything I wished I could change, it's fixed here. Mendez fired her sidearm at the walls, screaming for Reza to stop. The bullets vanished mid-flight. Not absorbed, edited. They were never fired. The architect didn't destroy resistance. It recontextualized it. It made rebellion meaningless by rewriting its origin. One by one, rooms opened for each of us. Private spaces. Memory-forged sanctuaries. Traps built not from steel but from regret. We knew now this chamber wasn't for feeding. It was for selection. It sifted through us, not for strength or intelligence, but for those most willing to trade their truth for comfort. The architect didn't need believers. It needed volunteers. Mendez set her comms to full emergency burst, broadcasting our coordinates into deep space, into blind sectors, into the dark between stars. No one answered. Or maybe they did, but the architect didn't let the replies through. We tried to leave. The exit wall returned. But different. It now showed images. Us. Not how we were. How we'd be if we stayed. Smiling. Whole. Healed. Perfect versions sculpted from our pain. I wanted to walk back. I almost did. I heard my father calling from my room. The father I lost when I was 9. I heard him laugh. Say my name like he used to. I wanted to forget the cold. The silence. The failure. But something inside me, something small, old, stubborn, held on. Because I realized something. If the architect had to show us these fantasies, then they weren't real. And it feared that we might still know the difference. We found the signal by accident, if there is such a thing as accident here. It was nested beneath layers of corrupted static, buried like a tooth in flesh, inside the station's emergency beacon array. Mendez isolated it after her 7th diagnostic loop. It wasn't transmitting. It was listening. And it wasn't broadcasting a distress call. It was broadcasting a welcome. It repeated in a frequency we couldn't hear with our ears, but our minds could feel it. A sensation like déjà vu with teeth. A recognition we hadn't earned. The signal wasn't alien. It was patterned in the shape of us, our syntax, our rhythm, our trauma. Reza theorized the signal was shaped by what the architect absorbed from previous visitors, hollowed minds now repurposed as broadcasters. Voices stitched into a chorus of permission, inviting more to enter, more to remember. We decrypted fragments. The content wasn't a message, it was an instruction set. Neuroemotive pulses designed to prime the brain for surrender. The signal prepared the mind before arrival, softened identity before the first footstep touched alien steel. It was not luring us into a trap. It was finishing what we had already agreed to the moment we heard its voice. The architect doesn't hunt. It curates. We traced the signal to a chamber unlike the others, smaller, colder, more intentional. A single chair sat at the center. Human design. Scratched. Bolted down. Worn by you.